Well, number one, coming out of the South, I rode on the back of the bus. Well, I was in Jacksonville, and I was an only child, and I got a scholarship to Morris Bryant in Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
But I couldn't wait to leave because of the racism.
It took me a long time before I would go south. You said you came from Texas, right?
Yeah.
And it sounded like you were saying that it was important to get out of Texas to do.
I grew up in Texas, and after my junior year, there was an opportunity to go to a work camp up north to do housing repair help in a poor neighborhood. And my father, when he found out that it was going to be interracial, told me he would not finance my going, and if I went, he would not finance the rest of my college education. It was very useful to me to live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in a black neighborhood with a black landlady, going to meetings and organizations run by people of color, having resolutions passed by local government. And that taught me so much about what still exists in our country, the whole difficulty with racism. And so when I moved to Troy, I got interested in fair housing issues.
The red sections on this map of Troy, New York, and the red lines on this map of Albany, New York, are examples of redlining, the practice of denying credit-worthy applicants a loan for housing.
My father, he lived in South Carolina, and he thought that by leaving the South, or Jim Crow South, that when he came north, racism would be behind him.
Yeah.
And what he quickly learned was that it was up here too.
Do you think a Negro family moving here will affect the community as a whole?
Definitely.
In what way?
I think that, well, the property values will immediately go down if they are allowed to move in here in any number.
The year is 1957. The town is Delmar, New York, which was, at that time, a segregated community.
I was approached by a woman I knew in the NAACP, and she said, "Are you renting your house?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "There's a doctor coming to town, and he's looking for a place to rent." And I said, "Sure, that sounds good." And she said, "But there may be a complication. This is a colored family. Would that be a problem?" she said to me. And I said, "Well, I'll check with my husband and get back to you." And I checked with Kendall. He said, "This is not Mississippi. There should be no reason for not renting to anybody." So, not seeing any kind of problem, I said, "Sure, let's meet the people and see if they like the house." And so Jim and Margaret Cunningham came to the house to look it over, and they had two daughters, Mickey, 12, and Fern, 8. I began to hear, what have I done? What have I done? The question arose of some places in Long Island, somebody put a burning cross in somebody's yard, and then I became nervous.
So my parents tried to protect us from the journey that they went through looking for housing. My parents were anxious about how we would be treated, how they would be treated. I saw also that the adults were hypocritical, comes to mind. To our shock, when we went to meet the minister as a new family joining the church, he had a big Confederate flag behind his desk. I did know and understand that the Confederate flag meant danger to Black people. My parents were concerned too. They didn't say anything during the course of that meeting, but listening in on parents' discussions, they talked about it on the way home and were not too happy about that. I did go to Howard University, which was a historically black college. So I got involved in the civil rights movement very quickly at Howard. I was in one class when a fellow student came into the class with flyers. And he went from student to student and asked, would you be willing to risk your life for your civil rights? The plan was that we would get arrested, that there would be mass arrests, and I decided that I would go to a cafe. The waiter came up and looked at us and looked at me and looked at them, and finally she asked me directly, are you a Negro? And I said, yes, I am. And she said, well, it's against the law to sit here with white people. It's against the law for you to even be in here. And I said, so I've heard. And she said, well, you need to leave. And I said, no, thank you. I'm going to stay right here. We didn't get served, of course. The police did come, and they carried us out, not violently. They knew by then that these busloads were there, that the press was there, and so on. So I think that they were trying to be strategic. We survived it. We were not injured, but we were scared the whole time. My parents came down to the March on Washington. There was a bus or several buses from the Albany area. It was wonderful to see them in that circumstance, to know that we as a family were committed to this kind of work.
Thanks to the Equal Opportunity Act of 1964, federal money came to Albany to start and maintain programs such as Head Start and the South End Neighborhood Association. Before too long, the city of Albany reallocated those funds. It was necessary to fight City Hall.
Trinity was an umbrella agency for SNCAP, South End Neighborhood Cooperation, because the city administration wasn't interested in that money because it was called anti-poverty money at that time.
Right.
And they said no, they didn't like it. And after we formed that group, a little later, we saw a need for a black male group, and we formed the Brothers. The Brothers started the trash removal. And there were so many other good things that we did. We were just good for the community. They could come to us and we could solve their problems. We could come up any given time with 50 people, any given time, to march on you, any given time. It wouldn't only be us, it would be women too.
Rastus Corning was the mayor, and I noticed that all the people in the black community seemed to be under some kind of great control. They were fearful of becoming actively involved in any political issues. And if you do, you might lose your employment or not get any employment. Your housing might be affected because many of the people had moved into this very place here, the Albany Public Housing, and people were really afraid. I became part of the NAACP Legal Redress Committee. I chaired that committee for a while and took on a number of civil rights kinds of issues. A lot of them dealt with policing. Policing was the major controlling force, and there was a lot of brutality. We started doing lawsuits after a while, which was helpful.
50 years ago, to show he was tough on crime, New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller succeeded in passing laws for life sentences and no parole for people convicted of even low-level drug crimes. Thus began the growth of a prison industrial complex.
The other influence was the Rockefeller drug laws, which gave police license to do more stopping of people and arresting them and incarcerating them. So those numbers have gone steadily up. But now, and we define it as colorblind, but it's not really. The impact is on people of color.
I remember Alice at the time of some of those Martin Luther King gatherings at the convention center in Albany, and they would have a march over to the Martin Luther King statue, and she would unfurl some banners that had different kinds of messages in it. I wish please, Alice, tell us what those messages were.
So the one at the convention center I had was a banner that said "No more prisons." Simple as that. And they had warned me before not to disturb anybody. I didn't disturb anybody. I just opened my banner, and then I think about 6 giant state troopers came and carried me out, and they said, "We'll take you anywhere you want to go." At the end of the hallway, said, "We'll take you anywhere you want to go." And they had this state trooper car, and I said, "If you think I'm getting in the state trooper car, you're crazy." So they said, "Okay, then we'll arrest you." I said, "Well, that's better."
In the late 1600s, in Pennsylvania, Quaker William Penn began helping prisoners. Quakers at Albany Friends Meeting continue that tradition.
Alternatives to Violence was started by Quakers in the late 70s in the New York State prison system. Today, the Quakers still administer the program, but the only requirement for running the workshops is a willingness to first go through them as a participant.
Well, I was involved in the Alternatives to Violence work, and I did it mostly at Green Correctional, which is down at Coxsackie. I learned a lot from these men, and I hope they learned something from our group and what we're trying to do, because many of them have gone on and become facilitators.
I'm inspired to write to a prisoner for years. He was in Leavenworth and he was in Texas, so this is an African-American prisoner. He spent more time in prison than he has out of prison. He was from a gang area in LA. That's how he wound up, and he's written a book.
I seen so much tragedy when I was in prison and growing up. I figured if I didn't open up my mouth, then I'd be a part of the injustice and the suffering that I experienced myself. I will never feel safe in this world because I've seen the monster of men. I don't know how many people have cried on his shoulders, and I don't know how many people that's, seeing things that just change them. But it's one thing that I would never be able to get out of my mind. And it's one of the things that led me to be an activist as well, is the scream that a mother has when she first learned that a child has been murdered. It's something that pierces your heart.
Activism was never anything that I was even remotely interested in, and then I made the mistake, and it was a mistake, of having a son at a late date in life, 2005. I had figured out how I could walk through the world as a black man without getting in too much trouble. Now I had to figure out how to help this brown boy navigate a world that's not really okay with brown boys. And that became a personal responsibility. I decided, I don't know how or why, to make this sign, which is in my car. And the sign says, "Stand Against Racism." And it took a long time to make the sign. And then it took a long time to decide to stand with the sign. And I realized that that's kind of part of that process of stepping out in front of people actively. It's not an easy thing to do. But eventually I did it, found a corner, stood with the sign, and I patted myself on the back for it until I realized, that was pretty safe. Why don't you do something a little more dangerous? So I drove from Albany to Route 2 out near Grafton, going towards Grafton. There's a Stewart's out there in this kind of country, and I was going to stand with my sign in the country. On the day I drove out there, the closer I got to the spot, the more afraid I was. And when I got there, I couldn't stand. So I turned around and I drove back home. And on the way back, for theatrical purposes, I can tell you that I heard the voice of Rosa Parks or Emmett Till or Martin Luther King or Malcolm X in my head saying, "What are you going to do?" But the truth is, I didn't hear their voices. I heard my own voice saying, "What are you going to do? How are you gonna be anything in the world if you don't go ahead and do this?" So the next day I drove back and stood for an hour and nobody shot me.
We will not rest till the storm is over. We will not lay this.
Early in my career, I was at a conference, and one of the principal speakers at this conference was James Baldwin. And he said, "I understand there are lots of artists here, and I'm so happy to be in your presence. The role of the artist is to see the world in which you live, and then to take what you see into your filter and process it in the way that you do, through music, through art, through speech, through writing, and then show the world what you see."
On solid ground. It's been a long, hard journey.
And so I take my turtle, I take my symbols, I take my songs, and I move forward knowing that if in fact something does happen, if I am beaten for democracy, if I am killed in the line of fire from protesting for better jobs or for voting rights, or simply for the right to exist on a daily basis, that I am one of a long line of people. Fannie Lou Hamer said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." Well, because of her, I have more energy. Because of her, I have more wisdom. Because of her, I have more courage.
A friend of ours gave us a sticker. That is the Black Theater Troupe of Upstate New York. Okay? And those are really nicely printed from a print shop. All I have to do, put it on my car window, I can promote our theater company. I can do that because I can get up in the morning and then somebody broke my window because it says Black Theater Company in it. I still have to deal with that. There's two reasons why I started a theater company. To promote diversity, to bring more people of color, and to do meaningful work. Meaningful meaning, I don't think I'll ever be in theater if I was just going, on stage to do some Neil Simon play and something. We did a production called 846. That's the amount of time when the police has his foot on his neck. George Floyd, it took before he died. Each theater company had to do a piece that with a total of 8 minutes and 46 seconds. People start saying, "Well, Remy's an activist." I said, "No, I'm not." Then I said, "Well, maybe I am," because I find a play that can educate people. I raised my voice on stage.
How do you get the community to trust the police? Which I think it's an important issue, because if we really care about public safety, you've got to have the community involved and willing to cooperate with the police to keep the whole community safe. What we have to do as a society and as a community is to understand how structural racism works, that it's embedded in all of our institutions.
Yes, yeah.
And it's much more subtle in a way, but it's there. And if you have policies and programs that promote inequality, that's racism. And I'm also concerned about police officers not knowing the civil rights history.
I spoke at every church here in Albany, except 2. And I went and tried to get every church here in Albany to adopt as a surrogate family either one young man, one young lady, a senior citizen, or a prisoner. I figure if each church was to adopt one person, that they could alleviate a lot of the problems that we have here in Albany.
Learn from people of color, what they've been through, what they still have to go through. Overcome your hesitation to deal with this issue.
There seems to be more emphasis on trying to think of the whole history of racism in this country, which I think hopefully will be positive in getting people with white privilege to recognize all the positive things that have happened to them.
I will say that in this time, presently, I have, for the first time, begun to get a taste of what it is to be an activist in the way that the old line folks did. I have never felt less safe in this country.
I'm going to keep fighting, doing the kind of play that I do, because somebody got to do it.
Somebody's got to do something.
We apply pressure in some way to get a result that we hope will cause things to be different. But as much as things have changed, so much is still the same. So what's changed? I don't know.
Yeah, there's been changes. There has been changes, but like I said, it was good for a long time, for a while, and now we're going back to where we started, which is, it's a waste. What are you gonna do about it? We're gonna have to bite the bullet and keep moving.
When you're working to build a movement, you want to be very careful to always leave room in your heart for the transformation of those you oppose. Because if in fact you don't leave room for transformation and for the change of those you are opposing, you will eventually become what you hate.
We will not rest till the storm is over. We will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. We will not rest till the storm is over. We will not lay this burden down. We will not rest till the storm is over. Hey, we will not lay this burden down. Keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. Till we stand all together on solid ground. Till we stand all together on solid ground.